at this time, obviously, the foremost thing people are talking about in terms of libertarianism is Javier Milei becoming president of Argentina. And I personally have, I'm personally very happy about this turn of events. We know that Argentina was under the grip of Peronism, long ago, and still today, to an extent, is. Now, if Milei accomplishes nothing else, I hope that he'll at least be able to get people to stop associating Peronism with capitalism, because this is more of a corporate socialism, obviously not a stable economic system by any means, and unfortunately one that I think is all too similar to what we currently have in the US. I mean, as far as Argentina, they have one of the highest inflation rates in the world. I mean, I know that in 2022 it was at over 72%. And in 2023, it's, approaching I may very well be over 100% at this point. And basically, I mean, this is a country that's been having trouble borrowing from its neighbors. It's defaulted on its debt 9 times, I know, over the past 2 centuries, which is, exceptionally high. And so basically, when I see Javier Milei's success, I'm certainly surprised that he's been able to become president, but I'm not that surprised considering the current circumstances of Argentina. We've seen a lot of, wishy-washy, empty communist, socialist rhetoric, and obviously none of it's really gotten them out of this situation. So now we see a country that really has its back against the wall, essentially. Now we have somebody out here who's actually talking about bringing in some type of change. An anarcho-capitalist actually becoming the president of a country is completely unprecedented. But here we are, we're seeing it happen now in real time. And, I think that there are nothing but possible, positive benefits to come from this. And I'm kind of curious what your take on the situation is, how you're responding to this news, and what you think is your outlook for Argentina in the days ahead.
Yeah, so I think that Javier Milei is a great example of something I've talked about for a long time, which is that you don't get the needed change for liberty until the pain to stay the same outweighs the pain to change. So I've talked about this in so many different shows and so many different places. Sometimes it's hard for people to really get that, but I give lots of examples, just like with the lockdowns and shutdowns and people seeing these riders go around and destroy everything, and they try to call the police like, help. And they're like, nah, we're good. Enjoy your destroyed city, right? You need that level of horror for people to finally wake up and get uncomfortable, say, oh my gosh, what is going on? Like, what world am I in? So Argentina, as you aptly noted, is a place that has really gone down the tubes, right? The pain for them to stay the same definitely outweighed the pain to change. And it really took a lot of inflation, a lot of corruption to get there, unfortunately, but that is the nature of pain signals, right? When your body gives you a pain signal because you get a cut, it goes, ouch, don't do that. And if you don't have that from what is socialistic or democratic socialistic practices and cronyism, if you don't have that pain, then what is wrong in the first place, right? How can you say that communism, socialism is bad if it doesn't feel bad? If it feels great, it makes no sense. So logically, you have to have the pain of the materialized action from socialist-oriented policies come to fruition before people really start to feel that financial struggle and go, oh my gosh, what have we done? And so that's the reality of political reality. You don't get the change until people are genuinely suffering, unfortunately, in most cases. It's not always. There's always a means that, sometimes there's a type of, cultural underbelly movement that rises up and kind of change things before it's too late. That can definitely happen. But it's unfortunately for a lot of people, especially if they're checked out or they get comfortable, especially it happens with prosperity, that they don't care until it's too late and they're really starving. So I think Javier Milei's election is a wonderful signal. I don't care, about what could possibly happen with him, and maybe he gets assassinated or maybe he gets corrupted. I don't know. To me, that's not really the end sight right now. The sight right now is that people have gotten so frustrated that an unapologetic libertarian, someone who literally says to shove the state up your butt, you know what I mean? Like that level of fervor just won, right? And not just by a small percentage here, a significant percentage. So we have, in a country of about 46 million people, a popular election, a popularity contest, where someone who's unapologetically libertarian, open about liking Mises and Hayek and Rothbard, and who calls out socialists on the left with anger on TV, and personal favorite of mine, I will say, is also a cosplayer and a fan of, having a little fun with music and dressing up. He's out there winning. So to me, this is amazing. It's showing the cultural shift. And this is what I always say with election stuff. A voluntarist, I still think political realities matter, and they are signs for what is to come, right? If you're seeing this type of change at the political level, where you're seeing libertarians get into office, and this is a historic event, people are trying to say, oh, this has been done before. No, it hasn't. Not a single person ever has been elected as president being openly, unapologetically libertarian, saying their ANCAP, holding up a black and yellow flag. This is an unprecedented in human history event. It is unreal. And if people don't take that into consideration, realize how significant it is, they're going to miss out on what's going on, because this is going to cause people all around South America and up to Latin America, and of course, English-speaking countries like here, where people do pay a little attention, to suddenly be like, oh, okay, that's unusual, and to look into who this guy is and what he's done. And if you go to his history, it's pretty hefty on the economics talk, and it's pretty hefty on calling out socialism. This is not someone who's just giving lip service, like Trump, and people try to compare him to Trump. It's like, this guy's nowhere near what Trump is, not even remotely close. You have to be absolutely crazy to think that he is anything remotely close to what Trump is in terms of his actions and past beliefs, in terms of how he's presented them. I mean, it is a diametrically opposed thing. So, I ignore all the stupidity and the hate and all this other stuff that comes out with it. Would say like, oh, but he's a Zionist, or, oh, he said good stuff about the Ukraine. I'm like, yeah, and so does every other freaking Western government that's supplying them with weapons and money and all this other stuff. The difference is that this guy is actually talking about real economists, real economics, unapologetically, and getting people to look into these things who would never, ever, ever come across this anywhere else. They would never see this in a public school. They would never see this on the nightly news at prime time. And now they are, because this guy decided to be an unapologetic, charismatic, crazy, 70s style hair guy who's, just going to get your attention and be wild with it. He just ran with it. So again, it just doesn't matter to me whether he is, is he a CIA puppet, or is he this, that? I don't care. You look at what happened, and you look at the effects, and you count that. You count that and what's going to happen. Just like with Snowden, right? I don't care whether Snowden is a CIA asset or a Russian asset. This, that. What did Snowden say and do, right? Did Snowden cause a bunch of people to be like, oh, crap, the U.S. government's actually really corrupt and they're spying on us, right? Is that what happened? Or did he make people go, oh, the government's great, right? So you just got to look at the net effect. What is actually taking place with the person, and appreciate that. And we have to take everything else, whatever later on as it comes, because political realities may be different. There can be corruption. There could be, all different types of things going on, behind the scenes. We don't know. We won't even maybe know for sure, because it's so distant from us. But we know at a minimum that this person, for the past, solid at least 7-8 years, has been unapologetically ANCAP in his rhetoric, has called out socialism and communism, has been effective at, rallying people together for this and creating a kind of branding culture with it. And personally, I already knew about him from way long ago, because the person who did his costume actually reached out to me about voluntarist, because she was looking at my stuff when designing it. So that's another story. But, basically he was already on my radar. So I kind of had a little idea of who he was and all this other stuff from years back. But to see him now become, an actual head of Argentina is pretty wild. You know what I mean? That's something that's pretty unreal to think about when you think about what many would say, especially these past 5-6 years. They're like, oh, libertarian can never win. Oh, what's the point? They could never get popular support. You got to either, if you're pragmatic, water down the message, or, oh, you're not going to be taken seriously if you are too charismatic and funny and goofy and silly and calling out people and, bombastic. And I'm just laughing at these people, because this is, definitely what I've been preaching and doing for over 10-15 years at this point. We're talking about me actually doing more outreach, as opposed to just being a learning person. And we've always, that is both me and philosopher, have always had a very much be in your face, unapologetic, libertarian message. We're going to change the culture. We don't care what you have to say or what the naysayers say. We're going to do this whether you like it or not. So I think that more people need to adopt his mentality at a bare minimum. At a bare minimum, people need to be comfortable calling out socialists and communists and not giving them an inch. And that's certainly something that we've always been about, not giving them an inch, because if you do, you're essentially lending credence to the idea that the government is going to ethically and effectively centrally plan and do violence. And that's the opposite of the direction we're trying to go in. We're trying to get people to think outside the state. So the only way you get there is to get people to actually think outside the state consistently, no exceptions. So, if we can appreciate those aspects and those wins and ride off of that, that is, celebrate what's good, right? Don't ignore the bad or not call that out, but celebrate what's good about this, and then use that as a platform to continue to do outreach and get people like, okay, so this guy won, so what's he about? Well, let me tell you. Let me tell you what he means when he says he supports Austrian economics, or he wants to end central banking or whatever else. He wants to cut these agencies. Why is he saying this? Okay, let's talk about it. So it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity, and those who don't seize it are wasting a great time to be had with this wonderful event. And those who do seize it and use it as an opportunity to educate others are going to have the blessings of what that will reap in terms of long-term sustainable culture change of people who are now curious and actually seeking and are looking for people, thought leadership to give them the guidance of what they need to fully understand what it is that this guy was all about, and why he got so popular in the first place.
The libertarian movement, I wouldn't even say has gotten their foot in the door. I'd say that the libertarian movement is now completely in the room with this. We have something now that we can really point to. Although I've got to say, I really am kind of interested in that story you were talking about with the costume designer. So I don't mean to pry, but that just seems like a very interesting connection, that, you would be involved in a circle, that wide, that you're actually connected with somebody such as Milei. Have you had any direct contact with his, election, with his campaign team or anything?
No, not like that. It's just that when I think they were dating at the time, but Lilia, and I always say it wrong, Lemonade. It's Spanish, so I'm not exactly sure the pronunciation. But basically, at the time, she was looking to figure out how to make his costume, right? Because he wanted to create this Captain Ancat costume. So she was searching up symbols, searching up designs, and then came across my stuff. And then she reached out to me and was like, hey, this is awesome. I love what you're doing. She's like, we got a real one named Javier in Argentina. I was like, oh, awesome. Well, thank you. I'm like, well, feel free to check out, everything we're doing here. And I'm excited to see what you do with your stuff. And she's like, oh, yeah. And if you ever want, us to do something, with cosplay stuff, like, let me know. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And I'm like, and I didn't particularly follow up with her about, anything of that, because it was just like, oh, okay, you're in Argentina. I mean, what am I going to do about that? You're pretty far away, but I'm glad that you're at least checking out the voluntarist stuff and are using that as a basis to kind of think about what kind of design possibilities you could do for his cosplay. And she did her own suit too, and she wore that on TV. So I was definitely way ahead of everybody else when it came to him and knowing what was going on with his career, just because, being connected to that community. And a big part of our fandom too, with some of our music, actually comes from both Brazil and Argentina. There's a big ANCAT community in Brazil and Argentina. As you can see, obviously, that's the reason how we won. So me and Far are a bit more internationally minded. Some people are only looking at US things, but we have a pretty worldwide view when it comes to being connected with different people doing liberty things around the world. We keep pretty steeped on the global scale of things. So we have a good sense of what's going on with events and political dealings in certain other countries where there's some liberty activism going on.